Here we go, another episode of Mystery Wire with George Knapp. I'm Ron Futrell. One of the things I like about Mystery Wire is we got a pretty broad definition of what Mystery Wire is, wouldn't you say?
It's basically whatever we say it is. We used to focus a lot on government conspiracies, Area 51, UFOs, and still do. But, as when you were first working with me to pull together all this content, you and I agreed that it should probably include a lot of mob stuff. That's the central core issue in the history of Las Vegas. It's what I first followed as a reporter right from the get-go, because I happened to just accidentally meet some of these guys before I was even reporting for Channel 8. And I think people will enjoy seeing some of that content on this show as well.
No, it is legendary. And you see at the bottom of the screen there, Frank Lefty Rosenthal is the topic of today's Mystery Wire and the mob. We're going to be doing a few shows on the mob here and talking about that. And, okay, the mob in Las Vegas. You got here early
I arrived
80s.
in Las Vegas in 1979. I got to Channel 8 in 1981.
81, you were covering this story. I got here in 84. I met him one time after the Summer Olympics in L.A., and I'll give that story a little bit later. But you had quite a few conversations with Lefty Rosenthal, with Frank Rosenthal.
When I first got to Channel 8, it was sort of the beginning of the end for the mob. The pressure was on. There were perp walks, arrests, stories, leaked wiretaps almost every day. And I covered the mob in part because I had met a couple of these guys and knew them before I went to work as a reporter. But also everyone was covering it. Everybody on the staff at Channel 8 was covering the mob because every day there was something going on. So, and eventually it kind of took over. Ned Day was our premier mob buster who really went after these guys as a columnist, anchorman, and commentator on Channel 8. And we had mob stories all over the place. So eventually you show up at a Gaming Control Board hearing. In these days, Lefty Rosenthal, the Gaming Control Board was trying to kick him out of gaming, put him in the black book, and he kept finding creative ways to avoid that and stay in the business in the Argent casinos, which were the focus of the FBI investigations, the focus of the mob skimming operation. So I'd show up at all these things, and eventually he got used to seeing me.
And said, hey, let's talk, let's chat. And here's one of the early stories you did, and we're going to have a bunch of them for you here. But we're going to go in the Wayback Machine, I believe 1982. You're going to see a young George Knapp.
8 years ago, Frank Rosenthal was on top of a glamorous world. He was director of operations for Argent Corporation, Alan Glick's four-casino empire. He was making $250,000 a year and became known as a big tipper and high roller, a bon vivant who was seen in night spots all over Las Vegas. Now it is different. His job is gone, his wife has left, his battles in the courts are over, and he just may be a man who knows too much. Rosenthal came to Las Vegas in 1974 and was a nationally known odds maker. Along the way, though, he had picked up a 2.5-page arrest record, including a conviction for fixing a basketball game. He had been a boyhood friend of Tony Spilatro back in Chicago, where he first learned to gamble.
What is the attraction for Frank Rosenthal to gambling? I mean, not that it almost sounds like a habit if you start at that point in time, but what's the attraction for it?
Well, as a young boy, I did enjoy trying to predict the outcome of a sporting event, football or otherwise. I think it is something that all of us do. I think if you go to a racetrack, Bob, around the country, I think the need for gaming, the enthusiasm for gaming in this country today is so great.
It was this background, though, that turned things sour for Rosenthal in Nevada. In 1976, his gaming license was revoked by what he called a biased commission. Years of legal battles took him to the U.S. Supreme Court, but it didn't get his license back. He then moved over to become entertainment director at the Stardust, a non-gaming position. And to prove he was an entertainer, the Stardust paid for his own television show.
A professional gambler who Sports Illustrated has acclaimed as the best football handicapper in America. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Frank Rosenthal.
But state gamers who thought Rosenthal's record was an embarrassment to the industry called him in again. They said he was still in a key position but was unsuitable for the job. Rosenthal's case wasn't helped any by findings that while with Argent, he had stood by while $7 million in profits had been skimmed by organized crime. Another series of hearings, another round of court battles, and the same result.
We're all so self-righteous. You did find out that Frank Rosenthal wasn't lying about Harry Reid asking me for a special favor. The chairman had the nerve to call me a liar.
Rosenthal is still banned from gaming. Last year, he lost his wife and at the same time split with his old pal Spilatro. He is said to know much about the local mob, but is thought to no longer be of much use to them.
How long are you going to fight?
I'm going to fight as long as I can stand up, Bob.
George Knapp for News Center 8.
Okay, you see some familiar faces in there. Ned Day was in the crowd at one point, mentioned Harry Reid, former senator from Nevada. Oscar Goodman, saw a quick shot of him in there. You're going to see him in some of the stuff, former mayor of Las Vegas. What kind of guy was Lefty Rosenthal?
He was smart, brilliant odds maker. I mean, he created the sports book as we know it. There was no big sports book, super books. He created that one at the Stardust, and now we've got one at all the big gaming properties. He was a brilliant guy, an egomaniac, a little bit compulsive. You know, there's a scene. Robert De Niro in the movie Casino plays Ace Rothstein, which is Rosenthal, where he's counting the number of blueberries in each muffin. That's real. You know, that's real. He was very self-absorbed, but tricky. I mean, he managed to avoid state gaming officials and FBI and all that for a long time, and hang in the Argent casinos where millions of dollars were going out the back door.
I recall. Okay, there was an event. I mentioned the Summer Olympics, 1984. There was a guy named Dick Carson who I've lost track with over the years, but he asked me to MC an event with a lot of the swimmers. Some of Lefty's kids were swimmers, or they had a
his kids were
okay,
brilliant swim. Yeah.
Dick was bringing all these swimmers here for the Rowdy Gaines from that Olympics, and I was on the dais. I was emceeing it, and I was to introduce him. I remember asking Dick Carson, "How do I introduce him? Do I call him Frank Rosenthal, Lefty Rosenthal, what?" And he got a serious look on his face. He says, "Do not call him Lefty."
Yeah.
I said, "But I'm left-handed, just like him. We were southpaws. Would that work?" He said, "You call him Frank Rosenthal." I called him Mr. Rosenthal, sir. I didn't want my car blown up.
Yeah.
But he did, and you're going to report on that a little bit later, next segment, did have an explosion with his car in a parking lot here in town.
Yeah, during that period, a lot of people died, ghastly deaths. You know, there were attempts to cut off the line of communication between the people on the streets who had their hands on the skimming operation and the bosses in Chicago and the other Midwestern families. You know, the heat was on, and they wanted to eliminate witnesses. A lot of people died back in those days.
And then you had the feds trying to chase them all, and the local cops trying to do their best at that time.
Right.
Ralph Lamb probably.
Yeah, there were. Of course, Ralph was out of office by that point. We're talking about during the bombing of his car. But Ralph had sort of navigated both of those worlds. He knew that these mob guys ran the casinos, and he would let them go as long as they didn't commit crimes here. You know, but Metro, there'd been a lot of distrust between Metro and the FBI because there were leaks from Metro for a period. And as we learned later, one of the Spilatro's gang members was a Metro cop. And so it took a long time for the FBI and Metro to get back on the same page. But once they did, allied with gaming control, they really put the heat on to get the mob out of the casinos.
Okay, more when we come back with Frank Lefty Rosenthal and the explosion of his car and all sorts of stuff like that in the parking lot, and him and Tony Spilatro being at odds with each other as we go through some of George's reporting back in the day, 1982, as Mystery Wire continues. Mobsters like blowing up cars.
Here and there.
Okay.
Yeah, here and there.
Ned Day, before mentioned, he got his car blown up at one point. Lefty Rosenthal. Were you ever concerned?
Not really. I mean, I knew those guys, and you know, they considered us non-combatants for the most part. Ned was an exception because he went out of his way to antagonize them, calling them names and stuff in his columns and in his on-air commentaries. So he really went out of his way to antagonize him and invite trouble. The day they blew up his car was the best day in Ned's life. He was so happy because he knew he was getting under their skin. You know, it was confirmation.
He was safe. He survived. Okay, here's another one of your stories with Lefty Rosenthal. We've got 4 of them we're going to have here's the second story with Frank Rosenthal.
You will see no pictures of Frank Rosenthal as he looks today in this story. No cameras were allowed during the interview, and reporters had to agree not to discuss his appearance. But in Rosenthal's own words, he is a shaken man. Who did it? Who planted the bomb that ripped his Cadillac to shreds? Rosenthal has no answer to that question, or if he does, he's not saying. One possibility, the one advanced by Metro and the FBI, is that it was a mob hit, a contract put out by the Chicago family, and one that could involve his one-time friend Tony Spilatro. Said Rosenthal, "I don't even want to entertain that thought. It would make me very unhappy, very angry. It would be an unhealthy situation for all of us. All I know," he said later, "is that it didn't come from the Boy Scouts of America." Why would Spilatro want him dead? Rosenthal replied, only he could say if he had anything to gain by killing me. But the FBI may have thought of a motive. Secret wiretaps revealed that the mob thought Rosenthal's publicized fight for his gaming license was an embarrassment to them. They called him crazy and uncontrollable. Another possibility was mentioned by the lawmen to Rosenthal. They asked about his ex-wife, whose reported relationship with Tony Spilatro contributed to the split between the two men. Rosenthal discounts that possibility, but of his relations with Spilatro, he said, "I don't consider him a friend of mine." The question on his mind now is how to protect himself and his family. Rosenthal said both Metro and the FBI offered him protection in return for information about local mob operations.
So if this is sounding a little like the movie Casino,
Oh, yeah.
it's because it's sounding like the movie Casino that was done on this.
Yeah, I met with the producers of the film a couple of times when they were putting it together. Nick Pileggi was in town, and we gave a lot of our file footage, including the piece you just saw, to those guys, and it was recreated in the movie. It was a really tense time. I mean, that firebombing was a couple of blocks away from my house, and the story that you just saw, and there was another one coming, was based on Lefty Rosenthal invited me and Ned Day to his house the day after he was blown up. And he wanted to use us, I think, to deliver a message, and we can talk about that whenever.
And who blew up his car?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think that Spilatro was responsible. I don't know why he wouldn't be given that assignment, but it was for sure that the bosses back in Chicago were ticked off at Rosenthal for making so much noise, for being so outspoken, having his own TV show. The feds found that to be an abomination. It was a slap in the face for him to be on TV pretending he's an entertainer when they knew that all the skimming operation was based in the casinos where he had a hand in management.
And so the theory is, as an entertainer, they couldn't.
He didn't need a license.
Get rid of him and get him out, but still skimming the money.
Right.
And that was the Stardust, which is now where Resorts World is located in Las Vegas. Right. That's where the Stardust was, because we blow up stuff. Well, we blow up cars and casinos
that's true.
around here.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another story. Frank Rosenthal talking more about the battles back and forth between he and Tony Spilatro, and trying to figure out who blew up his car.
The tall, willowy ex-showgirl was for years a fixture at the side of her husband Frank in the hearing rooms and courts where he fought his futile battle to retain a gaming license. Now she is gone, although the full word on her death may be a long time coming.
L.A. homicide detectives say Mrs. Rosenthal was seen on the evening of November 6th walking along Sunset Boulevard when she began to scream for no apparent reason and then lapsed into unconsciousness. She was taken to Cedars-Sinai Hospital where she remained in a coma until her death 4 days later. There was Valium in her bloodstream as well as cocaine, but the actual cause of death was listed as a lack of oxygen to the brain. Authorities won't say yet that she died of a drug overdose. That will have to wait for the results of toxicology tests, and that could take a few weeks.
Officers now say there are no signs of foul play, even though they first reported that there wasn't enough Valium in her system to have killed her. Mrs. Rosenthal has had drug and alcohol problems before. It was while in an intoxicated state in September 1980 that she threatened to shoot her husband, according to court briefs. That blow-up, along with a rumored relationship with reputed mob boss Tony Spilatro, led to the Rosenthal's divorce. Reports also indicate that Mrs. Rosenthal spent time in a Long Beach hospital that specializes in drug problems. 1 month before Geri's death, Frank Rosenthal almost lost his life when his car was blown up outside of a local restaurant. At one point, authorities investigated Geri Rosenthal as a suspect in that bombing. Mr. Rosenthal told reporters that he didn't think his wife was involved, but that some of her L.A. friends might be.
Frank Rosenthal called us today to say that he and his children are grief-stricken over Geri's death. It's a tragedy, he said. The family is in mourning and will be for some time to come. George Knapp for News Center 8.
Okay, and that was after your meeting with Rosenthal and some of the things that he told you and Ned Day.
That was when I was 9 years old.
You
by
were,
the way.
you were a child back then. That's great stuff, and I'm glad they saved all this stuff here at Channel 8. Okay,
That's a
At 8
Bob
News Now.
Stoddall move. Yeah, he saved everything.
Okay, so what killed Geri? Do you know?
Yeah, she was on a downward spiral. A lot of drugs, a lot of booze, hanging with a bad crowd. She just overdid it, you know. And what I recall is that she was out of money. She had left here with like $1 million in cash, piles of jewelry that she looted from their bank accounts, as you see in the movie Casino, and it was all gone by then. She was it was a downward spiral. It was a sad story, but her husband didn't do it. Her ex-husband didn't do it. I don't think Spilatro did it. I don't think that the bombing of Frank's car and the death of Geri Rosenthal were related, except that they had happened in proximity to each other 1 month apart.
But those were things that were happening here in Las Vegas then. Okay,
all the
That's
time.
What
Yeah.
a crazy town. Yeah. Now people like to reminisce and go, "Hey, it was nice when the mob was here." You could argue there were things that were good. You know, the town was good. People were left alone and under control. But still, there was some nasty stuff that happened with the mob here.
I'll tell you about the meeting with Rosenthal if we have time in the next segment.
Okay,
Meeting at his house.
Okay, let's do that next segment. We do have another story to get to see the young George Knapp from 1982, and we will continue here on Mystery Wire. All right, welcome back to Mystery Wire with George Knapp. I'm Ron Futrell. Okay, let's talk. We have one more story to show you. We'll do that in a minute. But, okay, your meeting. You got more to add about your meeting there with Mr. Rosenthal.
Yeah, so the car bomb happens. The next night, Lefty Rosenthal invites me, Ned Day, and I think it was Myron Borders to his home. No cameras. You just got to sit here. You can't tell anyone what I look like. Well, he was all bandaged up. He had cuts and scrapes all over the place. His arm in a sling. And he sat there, and he wanted to use us to send a message to Spilatro and to the bosses back in Chicago that he wasn't ratting out, that he really, I don't know who did it. I'm not even asking who did it, but the feds have offered me everything. They've offered me not only protection, but villas, wineries. He was making this stuff up, I think, about this elaborate offer that they had made to him to become a witness. And he used us to tell the story that he wasn't folding and he wasn't cooperating. We know for sure that he did later. He did become a federal witness. What he shared with the feds, I don't know, but he did roll over on some of his former associates. But being there with him in his house and seeing him in the condition he was, I recall that 3 or 4 weeks later was Halloween. I get invited to a Halloween party. I don't have a costume. I went as Frank Rosenthal. I threw an old suit of mine in a fireplace and burned it all up and put a bandage on my head, and that was me. Yeah.
Do we have pictures of that anywhere?
No, we do not.
Come on. Those are the pictures I'd want to find of you as Lefty Rosenthal back in the day. Okay, here's our final version of this story. There's no real conclusion to it, but more with George from 1982 with Lefty Rosenthal.
So far, the death of Geri Rosenthal is being treated as a homicide by Beverly Hills detectives. The cause of death, lack of oxygen to the brain. A small amount of Valium was found in her blood, but detectives say there was too little of the depressant to have caused the death. The willowy blonde, shown here with Frank Rosenthal in 1977, separated from her husband after a bitter blow-up in September 1980. Reports then said that Mrs. Rosenthal threatened to kill her husband and that she was involved with Tony Spilatro. After Geri removed more than $1 million in cash and jewelry from the Rosenthal safety deposit box, Frank filed for a divorce. Mrs. Rosenthal's death comes just 1 month after her ex-husband narrowly escaped serious injury when his car was blown up outside of a Las Vegas restaurant. 2 weeks after that, News Center 8 broke the story that Mrs. Rosenthal was being investigated as a suspect in that bombing. At least 3 of her Las Vegas friends had been questioned. Frank Rosenthal himself had commented on that possibility a few days after the bombing. He told reporters then that he didn't think his ex-wife was involved, even though he wouldn't rule out some of the, quote, people she had been running with. During the interview, Rosenthal admitted that he had a big life insurance policy and hinted that Geri was the beneficiary. And what does her former husband think about the death? We called Frank Rosenthal at his home tonight, apologizing for calling at the late hour, and asked for a comment. I'm not going to discuss this with you, he said. I'm not disturbed. I'm just not going to discuss it with you. George Knapp for News Center 8.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Rosenthal, for the late phone call, but go ahead. But he answered.
Yeah. I had just come from my high school prom, as you can see from that
yes,
video.
and you can see from the younger George pictures. Okay, and then what became of Frank Rosenthal then from here? He's no longer moved to Florida, is no longer alive, obviously.
Yeah, he moved to Florida. He was running a nightclub for a couple of years. He gave a really extended interview to a colleague of ours from a Chicago TV station, and we turned it into a series. Of course, Channel 8 had done a lot of content productions about the mob. The classic one is Mob on the Run, produced by Ned Day and Bob Stoddall. I updated that in the 90s, about 10 years later. We did a number of series on Lefty after he died, filed FOIA requests for his records. I mean, Channel 8's files and soon Mystery Wire files will be filled with all that old mob stuff. You couldn't make up a story as good as it was and as wild as Las Vegas was back then.
What led to the mob finally leaving Las Vegas? How was it I know people are going to say, "Oh, they're still here." There's different mobsters. Maybe the guys in the corporate offices at the banks, but we won't get into that.
Yeah.
but what led to the mob eventually being run out of Vegas?
It was a combination of things. I mean, they were good when they ran the casinos. I mean, it was a good time. That's why you get the old cliche: the town was better when the mob ran it. The mob didn't run the town. The mob had a stake in pretty much every hotel on the Strip because Teamster money was what funded them. But they couldn't expand. They couldn't get bank loans if they were mobsters. So eventually they had to go. And of course, eventually with the burglaries, the murders, things of that sort, things that had always been kept out of Las Vegas became too much. The FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the state gaming officials, Metro, all combined, and they had to go. And there's the only way corporations could come in. Now you're not so sure that was a great idea. But back then, once Howard Hughes started buying properties up, corporate America started paying attention to it. Hey, this could be a pretty good business to invest in.
Take me into real quick how a skimming operation would work. How do you skim money from a casino? And everything's cash back then.
Yeah, it's all in the count room. It's all in the cash and what gets reported, and they literally carried it out the back. They had rigged a coin machine, weight systems. They had to weigh the coins in those days to say how much it was. They would rig those coin systems so that they showed a certain number that was not the actual number that had been produced by the slot machines, and they would literally carry it out the back door in a bag.
And take it to the mobsters in Chicago, in Milwaukee, in New York, or wherever.
Kansas City. Yep.
In Kansas City,
right.
Physically take the money to them, and then obviously not pay taxes on that money. So that's where the feds got involved.
Right.
And not get an accurate count of
what
they were making.
I don't think anybody knows for sure how much money was skimmed from all of these casinos. The Argent casinos, those four, and then the Tropicana and other properties. There was millions and millions of dollars that went out the back door, and nobody cared. There wasn't a corporate bean counter there paying attention that the coffee shop has to make money and we have to charge for parking. It was a much different time.
Well, that's Vegas today. That's with the parking. Okay, thank you for watching us. We're going to be doing mob stories all through the month of February, taking a trip to the Mob Museum and having more of these stories. So stay tuned. More Mystery Wire to come. Hope you've enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, we like doing this show, but we also want people to check out the website, Mystery Wire, which you can find on 8 News Now. We have all these big, long interviews on UFOs, on mob stuff, all the series that we produced over the years. So hope people will go and check that out.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye for now.